I, 34 female, found out that my now divorced husband, 36 male, was cheating on me a few years back. Our marriage was thriving for the longest time. We were made for each other. I met him a little after high school. He was working at a Blockbuster movie store, and even though he had a bad habit of burning through his money, he never made it an issue between us. He was very sweet, and we were dating in weeks. He was the man for me, but Jolene had other ideas. One night he didn't come home from work, or the next morning. I was panicking, and I was even going to call the police when his mother broke the news to me. I found out he had been cheating on me with another woman for the past 4 years, which was probably the reason he never bothered me about money. She was from a rich family and was funding his spending habits. I was completely devastated. It took me a couple of years to get over him, and I still don't think I have. I texted him we were over, but I think he needed a little announcement since he didn't respond and never came back for his things. He was gone. Now to present day, like I said, I don't think I'll be completely over him, but I don't need him in my life. I have never reached out to him since that text, and as far as I knew, he was still with our Jolene. I still keep in touch with his mother. She and I were pretty close, and she told me she cut contact with him for what he'd done. Lately, according to her, he'd been reaching out to his parents for money. It was disheartening. I had never known this man to be a beggar, but then for 4 years I don't think I knew him at all. But I didn't think much of it until a few weeks ago he reached out to me. I was in my kitchen when I got a text from him asking for money unceremoniously. It caught me so off guard. I had to double check that this text did come from him, in fact. It did. Reluctantly, I decided not to respond and went about my afternoon making dinner. By the time I sat down to eat, I had 43 texts in my messages, repetitively asking for money. It was too much. I decided and texted him back. We're as good as divorced. We've been that way for years now. I don't understand why you think it's appropriate to come begging me for money after you cheated on your then wife for years. Almost immediately, he responded with, I need $400 for rent. I know things were rocky, but you're right. We were husband and wife, and shouldn't that mean something to you? I wasn't a bad husband. I didn't neglect or abuse you. I hit a pause. This man had hurt me deeply and abandoned me on a whim. I thought about the years I feel like I've wasted in pain over him, and I decided that I wasn't resolved to saying that was nothing or a consequence of what a good husband I had. I texted him good night and blocked him. I thought that was that, but the next day I got texts from an unknown number. Texts begging for money. These I ignored completely, dismissing them for scammer texts. Until that afternoon, I was spammed with calls and messages to pick up the phone. So I did, and it was him. He started yelling at me. He screamed how I must have hated him to leave him with no solution to his financial problems, screaming that I was a horrible and selfish spouse. I started to cry and I hung up and blocked this number too. It went on like this for 2 weeks. Every day, a new number, texts, calls. I'm surprised I didn't receive letters in the mail at that point. He had been trying so tirelessly to contact me for money, and he kept asking for more and more, too. Finally, I just decided to change my number. I thought that was that, but midway this week, I got a call from another number. I answered it with a wary pit in my stomach, and to my brief relief, it was a woman who started talking this time. Oh God, did she start talking. Apparently, this was Jolene, and while she started calmly enough, just pleasantries, asking my name, right after that, she started screeching like a strangled hen, berating me over the phone how I was so awful and selfish, how I was ruining my husband who was trying to be a good man and move on to be a good father to their son. I was shocked when I heard this. When he and I were together, he never wanted kids. He said they were expensive and too difficult. I had to call his mom at this point, and when I did, I was more shocked to find out that she had already known. In fact, that's how they kept getting my number. Turns out, when my husband reached out to her, he explained his situation with Jolene's pregnancy, and that was enough for his mother to forgive him. And she told me I should do the same and give them the money they were now both begging for. I feel alone now and distraught. On one hand, this isn't my responsibility to pay for their child, and I want nothing to do with my husband anymore. I just want to move on completely now. But on the other hand, the part of me that loves him doesn't want to hear about his child going on without because I somehow failed. I don't know what to do, but now he, Jolene, and his mother are all three texting and calling me to help him. Am I the AH if I decide not to help? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I wrote about my Jolene problem. I tried calling the police out of desperation, but they only told me there was nothing they could do. I wasn't being physically assaulted, so they couldn't help. It still baffles me how they can't do anything to help me when I'm being harassed so relentlessly. I continue to get calls and texts no matter how many numbers I've blocked. Both him and Jolene just scream at me at how terrible of a person I am. That I'm a heartless person to deny a mother in need. That their son will starve because I refuse to help them out. And the texts are far worse. It's filled with horrendous name calling and voice messages of them continuing to screech or sometimes even wail about how I'm ruining their lives. To stop blocking their numbers like a coward, to think about someone else for a change, and so much more. They've even sent me pictures of their son crying, saying, "Look at what you have done." I keep blocking numbers after numbers, but they just keep on coming. They will not stop for anything, and it's making me lose my mind. His mom even came to my home to yell at me that I should be merciful to those less fortunate than me. I tried to close my door, but she held it open, continuing her mantra before I finally got it to close and locked it. She spent nearly an hour screaming at me and pounding on my door before finally giving up and leaving. I have been nonstop crying, and I'm finding it hard to do the most basic things. My life is spiraling because of those three, and the constant belittling is so tiring. I'm so terrified of any of them showing up to my home, and I feel so vulnerable. I can't sleep because I have constant nightmares of them showing up to harass me. I'm not sure what I can do anymore. I feel so alone. I have no one to talk to except writing it all for strangers to read, and I'm desperate for a solution. I only cry throughout my days because of the constant calls and floods of text messages, hellbent on making sure I know what a heartless monster I am. What should I do? I need answers, solutions, and guidance. Update 2. I took people's advice and I started documenting their harassment. I recorded every call of them screaming at me. I took screenshots of their messages and the picture they would send of their son. I documented everything I could. I compiled every piece of evidence I had before going to the police again. I managed to get a restraining order against all three parties involved, and I was instructed to call the cops if they violated it. I also bought myself some outdoor security cameras just in case. Call it paranoia, but I wanted to be safe rather than sorry. I changed my number as well yet again, bought some pepper spray, and upgraded the locks on my doors. A couple of days after they were served the restraining order, in the dead of night, someone was pounding at the door. It was him and Jolene, along with a small boy who was crying. They were absolutely screeching for me to come out and face them while my husband tore up the restraining order papers. Jolene at some point even lifted the mortified child to the camera while shaking him, screaming, "You did this!" I immediately called the cops and they soon came to place them under arrest. I did decide to press charges against them, but ended up agreeing to a peace bond instead. They agreed to sign it to avoid going to court, and that was that. Their kid was removed from their care, however, for neglect and mistreatment. He was initially placed in a group home before they reached out to me and asked if he could stay with me. After some thought, I agreed. It's been a full year since. I moved from my old place for peace of mind, someplace else where I hope they'll never find me. I kept my security cameras and even adopted a dog for both company and safety. The kid still lives with me and he's doing great. He's a bright child, very sweet, and thankfully he's warmed up to me. Recently, he accidentally called me mom, and since then, I'm thinking of maybe adopting him. It's sad to think about what he possibly went through, but I'm glad he's happy now. I'm still wary and haven't healed from what happened with my husband and Jolene, but hey, I'm getting there. It's not all bad. I can finally breathe again. I don't think I'll ever get into another relationship, but I'm cool with that. Less problems. Thanks to everyone who gave me advice. I hope this conclusion is satisfying for you guys. You are not the AH for not wanting to help. Call the police. That's harassment and illegal. They can't do that to you. Sounds like it worked out in the end. Good for you. It was very sweet of you to take the kid in. Wishing you both the best. I, 48 male, have a 19-year-old son who was the product of my first marriage. When my son was 9, my late wife passed away from cancer. When we were both 25, she had 80% of her inheritance to buy a gas station. She quit her job for 5 years, focused on the gas station. The first few years were rough, and we needed the money I made from my job as a waiter to supplement our lifestyle. In the 2 years before her death, I became involved in the day to day operations. In her will, the gas station was left entirely to me. However, she indicated that she hoped I could teach my son about the business because while some families pass down homes, this was her legacy. I have since remarried to my wife, 42 female. She has a 15-year-old son from a previous relationship who I consider my own. The business is smooth enough that we can mostly be absentee owners. My wife, however, has been working there all day every Saturday for a while now. She often brings my stepson to work. Regretfully, I was too wrapped up with life's events to spend much time teaching my son about the business. I recently have become sick, and my wife has constantly brought up my will, and so has my older son. We have had many fights where she has stormed out and not come back for hours when I told her that my late wife wanted her son to get it eventually. Because the medication I take gives me feelings of anxiety and depression, it is extra painful when my wife will not want to talk to me because she is upset. She said that it is not fair to my stepson that I tell him I consider him my son, yet I would not be leaving part ownership of the business, our greatest marital asset and legacy, to him. I had originally set up my will so that all my assets outside the business would go to my wife and then she'd get 10% of the station. My other assets would give her around half my estate. And the business stake was just in case she needed more financial stability. My stepson gets a trust, but the remaining 90% would go to my son. But I feel torn because I really do not know what is right anymore. After a heart to heart, I changed my will so that my wife, stepson, and my son would each have 1/3 of the business. The rest of my will remained the same. When my son got home from college, I decided to take him out so we could be alone. I broke the news to him that he would have to split the business equally with his stepmother and stepbrother. He was silent for a long time. He told me he believed his stepmom would end up trying to force a sale with his stepbrother eventually. He then said this didn't come as a shock to him, but he was sure his late mother would have been surprised and told him to think on that. Then he walked out and he has avoided me since. AITA for doing what I have done? I already see the tension in the house, and I feel like I always come home and walk into the aftermath of an argument between him and his stepmom. YTA, this station was purchased with your son's mother's inheritance. You know that your first wife wanted the business to go to her son. You are allowing your current wife to bully you into her demands. She only works on Saturdays, so it isn't as though she poured her life into ensuring the business is successful. However, it sounds as though your deceased wife did. By splitting it into thirds, you are effing your son over. Your stepson and wife will have the majority ownership together. Not to mention, why the heck are you giving stepson an equal share as your son? It isn't as though this is just some random piece of property. The strong financial and historical ties to your son's mother make this an easy and clear answer. Me, 28 male, and my son's mom, Addie, had our twin boys 4 weeks ago. It's beyond hectic at the moment, trying to survive with two newborns. My mom barely called me after we hadn't spoken since telling her I got my friend pregnant. Unexpected, but we agreed we want to co-parent our kids. She didn't come around to accepting that until after the boys were born. She wanted to meet them. We didn't agree until now because we are both exhausted. Addie's staying at my place right now since there's more space and we are both here 24/7 with the kids. So I asked her if she was fine with my mom coming over to see the boys and she said yes. Not even 5 minutes after my mom shows up, she's asking me why the kitchen is so dirty. Gee, I wonder why. Every little thing she had something to say about. She was bothered about the twins' playmat still on the floor from when they were doing tummy time earlier, asking when was the last time someone took out the trash. That same morning, but when you have two newborns, the bin fills up quickly. I'm used to this with my mom because she always liked cleanliness, but I told her she needs to knock it off immediately. So there we are in the living room, chilling with the kids. By the way, Addie went to take a nap before my mom came over and woke up an hour later, so she went out to greet my mom. The three of us were talking. Little man got all fussy, so Addie took him from my mom to feed him. His crying woke up my other son in my arms, so I'm trying to rock him back to sleep. Addie took one to their room, so that way neither bother the other while we're trying to calm them down. My mom asked me if Addie is always this rude. I ask her, what do you mean? She says because Addie didn't bother to get up once my mom got there, but I told her, well, what do you expect? She just had a C section barely 4 weeks ago. Now we have two newborns with a fresh set of lungs to look after. We take turns getting a nap every chance we get, but according to my mom, it's not right since we are having company, so I told her, well, you weren't here to see Addie, you were meeting my sons. My mom still thought the least she could have done was show a little hospitality. Addie came in again when she was saying that. We both said we were exhausted. At least we were nice enough to let her come see the kids, even when it's been a long day. She still got defensive, saying she knew she was meeting her grandkids, but thought we'd at least tidy up, get ready for her to be here. I'm already really irked and didn't have the energy for this, and that's what I told her. Also, if she won't stop whining about the little things, then please leave. Which is what she did, but now she won't stop claiming I treated her so poorly on a day that was supposed to be memorable. My mom is expecting an apology from me for ruining her first meeting with her grandkids and pretty much acting like an a-hole. I'm not sure there's a better way to handle what happened. AITA? NTA. No one should go to the house of new parents and expect hospitality. Ever. If she wants things clean, tell her she is welcome to come over and clean herself or pay for a maid. Otherwise, she can keep her mouth shut.